November 22, 2015, Bentonville, Arkansas. At first glance, this is not just another average, unremarkable suburban American town. Bentonville holds a very special status. It is the global headquarters of the retail giant Walmart. It is a place where colossal corporate wealth meets quiet, impeccably manicured suburban streets. Historically, this city was built on logistics, precise data, corporate security, and strict order. But on this incredibly cold Sunday morning, all the usual order inside the large, beautiful home at 1127 SE First Street was violently and irreversibly shattered. Inside the spacious residence, chaos reigned, the aftermath of a wild weekend. Scattered carelessly across the living room were the remnants of a Saturday night party dedicated to watching a major football game. Empty beer bottles, dirty glasses, unwashed pizza boxes, and the lingering, heavy silence of a night that seemed to have gone on far too long. But the true, blood-chilling nightmare was not unfolding inside the house. Out on the wooden backyard patio, the scene was infinitely far from any peaceful morning idyll. At exactly 9:32 a.m., a desperate, panicked 911 call pierced the routine of the local police dispatch center. The homeowner, James Bates, his voice trembling, informed the operator of a chilling discovery on his property. His close friend and former co-worker, Victor Collins, had been found floating face down in the water-filled hot tub right in the backyard. When the Bentonville Police Department and the first emergency medical teams arrived at the scene with sirens wailing, their initial theory, based on a cursory visual inspection, leaned toward a tragic but mundane accident directly caused by excessive alcohol consumption. Such a scenario was frighteningly standard and predictable for the police. A group of adult friends gathered to watch football. Alcoholic beverages were consumed actively and in large quantities throughout a long evening, and a late-night swim in a hot tub ended in a sudden, silent, and fatal drowning. The mechanics of such deaths are well known to medical professionals. Highly intoxicated individuals simply fall asleep in the hot water. Their core body temperature paradoxically drops, their heart rate slows down, and the alcohol completely suppresses their natural survival reflexes. This happens in the suburbs with grim, terrifying regularity. But modern, high-tech forensic science never accepts convenient assumptions on faith. It is built exclusively on the search for tiny, visually imperceptible inconsistencies. And to the trained, cynical eyes of the lead homicide detective stepping out onto the wooden patio that morning, this crime scene had far too many strange details that wildly stood out from the overall picture. The illusion of a tragic accident was about to be shattered into a million pieces under the pressure of inexorable evidence. To an inexperienced civilian observer, this wooden deck seemed like nothing more than the site of a sad tragedy. But for the homicide investigators, the physical environment began to tell a completely different, dark, violent, and chaotic story of the night's events. First, their attention was drawn to the unnatural distribution of water. The area around the hot tub wasn't just lightly splashed, as is typical during normal bathing. It was completely, totally flooded with a massive amount of water. Huge puddles extended far beyond the tub itself, pooling at the thresholds of the back door and flowing abundantly off the edges of the wooden deck onto the ground. Furthermore, a sturdy, heavy-duty garden hose lay haphazardly tossed right on the wet wood, completely unspooled to its full length and still firmly connected to the water spigot. Why would anyone need to unspool a hose in the middle of the night during a hot tub party? Then came much more sinister forensic discoveries. A close, detailed inspection of the hot tub's plastic rim revealed several sharp shards of broken glass. These shards were completely inconsistent with the soft plastic cups that, judging by the trash inside the house, were exclusively used by the guests during the party. But more importantly, just below the rim, barely visible to the naked eye against the dark acrylic surface, were pale reddish-brown smudges. Preliminary chemical tests conducted by the detectives right at the scene instantly confirmed their worst suspicion. It was human blood. The official autopsy report, painstakingly prepared by the county's chief medical examiner a few days later, completely and unconditionally confirmed these grim fears. Victor Collins had not simply fallen peacefully asleep under the influence of alcohol and quietly drowned in the warm water. His body bore clear, undeniable signs of a brutal, desperate struggle for his life. The autopsy revealed a severely swollen upper lip, deep bruising on his sternum, and, most importantly for the investigation, petechial hemorrhages in his eyes. These tiny, ruptured blood vessels in the eyeballs are the classic primary medical hallmark of violent strangulation. The conclusion was unequivocal. This was no accident. This was a brutal, cold-blooded murder. The physical evidence pointed to a terrifying sequence of nighttime events. A furious fight broke out on the patio. Collins was grabbed by the throat and, using brute force, was violently held underwater until his lungs filled with water and he stopped breathing. After completing the crime, the killer, in a state of sheer panic, made a desperate attempt at a late-night cleanup. He used the garden hose at full blast to wash the blood and biological traces of the struggle off the wooden deck in the dark. James Bates, the homeowner and the only person whose presence on the closed property at the time of death was confirmed by the police, instantly went from a grieving friend to the prime suspect. Bates categorically insisted on his complete innocence. During interrogations, he claimed he had gone to sleep in his room around 1 a.m., leaving Collins alone to relax in the hot tub, and woke up the next morning, went outside and discovered his friend's lifeless body. However, the problem for the prosecution was that virtually no direct physical evidence directly linking Bates' hands to the act of violence remained. The water from the hose had done its destructive work perfectly, completely washing away the perpetrator's DNA, fingerprints on the rims, and obvious biological traces of the brutal struggle. Bentonville detectives perfectly understood they had an obvious suspect with a highly questionable alibi. But filing official first-degree murder charges and facing a subsequent jury trial requires something far more substantial than just a deductive theory and circumstantial water stains on the floorboards. An undeniable ironclad proof of Bates's presence on the patio at the moment of the murder was required. They desperately needed an eyewitness. Teams of investigators with warrants searched the entire house from top to bottom, looking for any clues capable of destroying the suspect's convenient alibi. They were looking for objective data. They looked for exterior security cameras, but there were none on the outside walls of the house. Traditional security alarms on the windows and doors had not been triggered that night. Typical suburban silence reigned around them, and none of the neighbors reported hearing any screams or sounds of a struggle. But sitting quietly and inconspicuously on the kitchen counter, just a few feet away from the large glass doors leading directly out to the patio and the hot tub, was a small, black plastic cylinder. It was a first-generation Amazon Echo. To fully comprehend the monumental, unprecedented legal battle in U.S. history that was about to unfold around this piece of plastic, it is necessary to deeply analyze the very architecture of these smart devices. Such gadgets are marketed as the absolute pinnacle of domestic comfort. At your request, they play music, control lighting intensity, set timers, and answer questions from the internet. But to perform all these functions flawlessly, they utilize a highly complex array of 7 hypersensitive far-field microphones. These microphones are specifically designed by engineers to clearly capture and recognize the human voice, even from across a room filled with extraneous background noise. The device is reportedly designed to remain in a completely passive mode, listening to the ambient background exclusively in anticipation of a specific pre-programmed wake word, usually the name Alexa. As soon as this wake word is recognized by the built-in local processor, the device activates instantly. It's crucial to understand the mechanics. It records a fraction of a second of audio even before the command itself is spoken. Then it captures the user's entire voice request and immediately transmits this entire audio packet via Wi-Fi to the secure encrypted cloud servers of the Amazon Corporation for complex natural language processing by neural networks. But this technology is far from perfect. Any owner of a smart speaker knows from personal experience that they regularly and unexpectedly trigger completely by accident. A line of dialogue from a playing television, a similar sounding word in everyday human conversation, or the chaotic, loud, unpredictable noise of a physical struggle could easily cause a false activation of the microphones. If the echo speaker had been triggered, even completely by accident, on that very fateful night of the murder on the patio, it meant something incredible for the forensic investigators. It meant that Amazon's servers could right now be holding on their hard drives a permanent, clear audio recording with a millisecond accurate timecode of the crime process itself. Realizing the colossal potential value of this digital data for the case, the Bentonville Police Department, securing the support of the prosecutor, issued a massive and unprecedented warrant to the Amazon Corporation. They legally demanded full access to all saved audio recordings, text transcriptions, and hidden background telemetry data that had been captured by this specific device between November 21st and November 22nd. This aggressive legal maneuver caused genuine panic and shock throughout the entire Silicon Valley tech industry. An ordinary household appliance, a piece of consumer plastic sitting on a kitchen counter to play music, was effectively being officially subpoenaed to testify against its own owner in a brutal murder case. The Amazon Corporation responded with a categorical refusal. The corporation immediately mobilized an army of lawyers and filed a 90-page motion with the court to quash the search warrant for their servers. Amazon's lawyers built a powerful defense, arguing that the interaction between a living human being and a virtual algorithmic assistant is protected under the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which guarantees freedom of speech and expression. They fiercely insisted that forcing a smart speaker to become a secret law enforcement evidence-gathering agent would fundamentally and permanently destroy the fragile trust consumers place in emerging smart home technologies. It would open a Pandora's box for total surveillance. This exhausting legal standoff lasted for long months, severely delaying James Bates's trial and shaping, before the eyes of the entire country, entirely new, uncharted boundaries in criminal law. The courtroom turned into a philosophical arena for discussing the most terrifying question of our modern age. At what exact moment does your constitutional right to privacy end if you voluntarily, with your own money, install a constantly listening, internet-connected microphone inside your own home? But while a fierce constitutional battle over Amazon's audio recordings raged in the higher courts, the technical investigators were not sitting idle. They discovered an entirely different, silent, and incredibly precise digital witness. One that did not require sending subpoenas to tech giants, one that did not hide behind the First Amendment, and one that meticulously logged absolutely every single drop of evidence. While all the media and the anxious public were completely fixated on the loud arguments surrounding the rights of the Amazon Echo, detectives quietly turned to the local municipal utility infrastructure of the city of Bentonville. Shortly before these events, the city had undergone a massive modernization of its utility grids, spending millions of dollars to equip all residential homes with new smart water meters. Unlike the old rusty analog dials that a utility worker manually checked once a month with a flashlight, this new digital meter worked differently. It recorded exact water consumption hour by hour, gallon by gallon, and continuously transmitted this data over a secure wireless network straight into the city's dispatch system. Detectives requested the minute-by-minute water consumption logs for James Bates's residence for the night of the incident from the utility company. When analysts at the police department downloaded this data and plotted a graph of the received telemetry, the results delivered an absolutely crushing, fatal blow to the suspect's fabricated narrative. The logs recorded a massive, inexplicable, and highly specific anomaly. Between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., during the exact same time window when James Bates, according to his sworn statement, was already fast asleep in his bed, and precisely when investigators firmly believed the murder and the subsequent frantic patio cleanup were taking place, an unbelievable amount of water was consumed at the house. The exact figure was 140 gallons. Picture a split screen. On the left half, a realistic 3D animation of a thick garden hose furiously washing blood and signs of a struggle off a blood-stained wooden patio in the dark. And on the right half, the digital line of a water consumption graph, which had remained completely flat and motionless all evening, and then suddenly, as if from an explosion, sharply shoots upward precisely between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., forming a massive digital spike on the monitor. This consumption was absolutely not the result of a random toilet flush or someone waking up to get a glass of water in the middle of the night. 140 gallons is a colossal industrial volume, exceeding 500 liters of water. It is the equivalent of a powerful garden hose running at full blast continuously, without being turned off for a very long time. This graph represented nothing less than the exact digital fingerprint of a desperate, panicked attempt to wash away a bloody crime scene. Bates and his defense attorneys desperately tried to explain away this strange anomaly. They suggested during interrogations that he might have simply been topping off evaporated water in the hot tub, or perhaps hosing down the patio earlier in the evening before the guests arrived. But the digital timestamps on the utility company's servers were absolute and ruthless. Software code did not care about the imperfections of human memory or cunningly fabricated defense narratives. The data clearly and impartially recorded the exact moment the water flowed through the pipes. Not a minute earlier, not a minute later. On top of this, detectives gained access to the digital logs from the cellular service provider for Bates's own smartphone. These logs showed that he was actively making calls and sending text messages during the exact same hours he claimed to be in a deep sleep. Combined with the readings from the smart water meter, the story of the perfect alibi began to rapidly and irreversibly collapse under the heavy pressure of dry metadata. Finding himself under the incredible pressure of this irrefutable digital evidence, the legal deadlock surrounding the Amazon smart speaker eventually resolved itself. Realizing that the case was taking a bad turn, James Bates, acting on the advice of his defense, voluntarily agreed to hand over his personal Amazon Echo data to the police. He naively hoped that these audio recordings would magically prove his innocence and confirm to the court that he had simply been listening to music that night. When the encrypted audio files were finally received from the corporation, unsealed by specialists, and carefully reviewed, they did not contain a so-called smoking gun, direct proof of guilt. There was no clear, crystal recording of a murder confession or obvious sounds of a violent struggle that the prosecution had so desperately hoped for. But that no longer really mattered. The main historic precedent of this case had already been successfully established within the courtroom walls. Although the charges against James Bates were eventually, after several years had passed, officially dropped due to emerging procedural complications, reasonable doubts raised by the defense regarding the exact medical cause of death, and changes in the initial testimonies of key witnesses. This investigation permanently and irrevocably altered the nature of work for forensic scientists all over the world. This hot tub murder case in quiet Bentonville clearly and practically proved a simple truth to law enforcement agencies. In our modern technological era, any attempt to clean a physical crime scene, whether with bleach, water, or fire, becomes a completely useless waste of time if the criminal naively ignores the digital environment surrounding them. Every smart light bulb you install, every digital water meter in your basement, every fitness tracker on your wrist, and every voice-activated virtual assistant on your desk is a high-precision sensor. They continuously, invisibly to the eye, and without any days off, record the complete history of your space in cold binary code. The devices we happily purchase in stores for the sake of absolute personal comfort. The things we ourselves voluntarily and with our own money invite into our living rooms, kitchens, and bedrooms just to make our daily lives a little bit easier, have transformed into the most objective, unbribable, and ruthless witnesses in the history of criminology. A physical footprint on a wooden deck can indeed be washed away with 140 gallons of tap water. Physical evidence can be burned. A bloodstain, even the largest one, can be permanently scrubbed from the floorboards using a stiff brush and harsh chemicals. But you cannot clean cloud data storage with a garden hose. Metadata is not afraid of bleach. It remains on the servers forever, waiting for its moment. Thank you for studying this convoluted case alongside the Forensic Mind Project. If you have the desire to find the truth that is always hidden in invisible digital footprints, and you want to understand how technology changes the world of investigations every single day, hit the subscribe button and be sure to join our new investigation next time. Stay analytical.